Stereo Azimuth here. HD800. It's not really a review. I just want to have a discussion for a second. Because I get asked about these and because so many people are curious, and I actually haven't had these extremely long time. So we're going to talk about the question, do I need HD800's? Is that something that, you're after, that you want? So we're going to talk about the good and the bad. Well, over here is going to be the bad and the good part of HD800's, because I think that they have a lot of trade-offs, but I think there's also a lot of things that, anybody needs to be aware of when you're, sort of climbing the ladder, so to speak, of like, I get these and I get these headphones, I get these headphones, and I get, and you can start anywhere. I mean, some people start at, HD 598s, or they start with Porta Pros, or some people just go ahead and dive right in. Let me get, HD 600s or something else crazy. So we're going to talk about, and those are all Sennheiser headphones. I mean, there's plenty of other headphones that are out there that you can, start with anywhere. But a lot of people, if you're watching this, you probably are curious about HD800's and, want to know, like, what the deal is. Like, should I go up this route? Like, is it for me? So, sorry about that. We got a list. So the first thing, we're going to go through the bad things first, of things to look out for, the things to be aware of. And I really won't even, I don't even really want to call it a bad list, but it's just a list of things, like I said, that any buyer would need to be, like, it's kind of like a concern, right? Like, you need to know, like, if you buy a sports car, that it can only seat 2 people. So, if you got a family, then, so be it. Anyway, so let's start with a list. First up, they are expensive. Even used prices, I mean, the lowest, $800, $900. It's nothing. That's not cheap. That is, a high mark. And, to spend, even if you look at retail prices for the newer version, which is the 800S, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but even that's like really high. Yes, there is the Drop 8XX, but that's a different headphone, which I'll also talk about briefly. But yeah, they chunk change for HD800's. They're the top of the line, I guess, consumer. Of course, they have like their flagship model or whatever their electrostats. But as far as like their main production headphones, they're the top of the line for Sennheiser. So next in line, and like I said, even on the used market, you're still looking at, anywhere between $800 to $1,200, depending on condition. Uncomfortable. These things don't have a high clamp force, which some people are like, oh yeah, I don't like when they squeeze against your head. But they are not like very sort of secure. They will, I wouldn't want to wear these like gaming, because I might be like moving around or doing something else, especially if I'm doing like, virtual reality stuff. So, and they just don't, the pads are very thin. They're not very thick. They're not very, squishy pads. They're not like, other pads. Like, here's some other one, this nice velvet, like, what's that, velvet? Kind of squishy kind of thing. So yeah, they're not they're not the most uncomfortable thing. They're a little bit heavier too, a little bit bigger, a little bit bulkier. You kind of look like, Princess Leia when you wear them. But we don't worry about fashion. So yeah, they're not the most comfortable headphones. They're not really gonna sweat a lot, but they're just not. After a few hours, they can get kind of uncomfortable. They're peaky. They have high peaks in the high range. So now we're talking about sound quality, and these high peaks can be good and can be bad because this leads to like words like clarity and transience and transparency and all these things. But that also, brings to the party, like you bring this area, you highlight this area, and it's like now all of a sudden recordings that I love and sounds that I love and all these, especially like classic rock recordings, like now sound bad. Like, so they're revealing, like it's revealing that it's a bad recording, but that may not be what I want, because sometimes I want to enjoy these bad recordings because they're great songs or that's what I remember. And so I think that purpose, which we'll talk about a little bit when I talk about the good stuff, but so you're aware those peaks are there. They exist. You can't stop them from happening. Now, when I will admit, when I first bought these, they were not as peaky as I thought they were. They were a lot more comfortable. Now, I have my serial numbers like a 18,000, but like some of the higher serial numbers, 30,000, 40,000, I mean, they may be a little more like steely, a little more peaky in that like high frequency range, at like 8K range or 6K range, something like that. It was like, and so yeah, they're peaky. There's no getting around that. Next thing that we'll talk about, number 4 on the list. We lost our scene, so I have to select it. Sorry. Bad sound. And when I mean bad sound, I mean exactly what I was just talking about before, where bad recordings sound bad, good recordings sound good, but the bad recordings, like, I mean, they really do sound bad. I mean, I love Led Zeppelin, but, and especially like Led Zeppelin 1 and stuff like that, and I can't listen to them on HD800's. Other people can, which I'll get to in a minute, and we'll talk about that. But sometimes I just can't deal. And some of the recordings from the 90s. I mean, obviously I'm, Gen X kid, grew up in the 90s, alternative rock and stuff like that. And, if I want to listen to like Foo Fighters or something, like one of those like loudness wars thing, like not going to really happen with 800s. Not an enjoyable ride. So we'll move on. It needs the right amp or setup. And to sound good, to really like highlight them, like I said, for these other reasons. Tubes, obviously, it needs something warm. You need a warm chain. You need, tube. Like I said, these are high impedance headphones, so tubes get along great, but then you got to find the right tube amp. Sometimes people spend time finding the right tube combination. They're buying these tubes, different ones, and trying them out. Some of that is like tube nervosa, like, do I have the right tube or whatever? And some of it is just like really synergy with your system and like finding that right balance, finding that right sort of those things that like make everything sort of happen for you. And it may happen for you on like certain recordings, and other recordings it may not. And it's just one of those things that you have to experiment with, but it's a very particular headphone, and it's not, given that it's not very forgiving, on whatever amplifier that it's hooked up to either. So we got that going for us. Number 6, there are other choices out there. There are other choices that are in the same price range, maybe even a little bit higher price range. I mean, there's, if you want to go the plainer route, there's like Susvara. If you want to go like the ZMF route, like there's, Atriums and other things. I mean, other ZMF headphones. You could go with, Focal Utopia, their top of the line, headphone, or Focal, whatever you want to call it. But the essence is like, yeah, there are other headphones that are more expensive, and some will claim that are even better than HD800's, and that's fine. Even some Grados, even. I mean, and that's also okay. But so yes, there are other choices. HD800 doesn't have to be like the end all be all headphone for everybody, for you, or for even like headphone world. It's the top of the line Sennheiser, but that isn't, it matters to you and your enjoyment out of it, not what other people say about the products. So just know that. Last thing, low serial number, which are very sought after, are very sort of rare, and also goes back to point number 1 of being expensive. So the lower the serial number seems to be kind of like the lower the peak. That's not always the case. I mean, some people have broken down different serial numbers, and there's been some variations in the serial numbers. But they did definitely change some manufacturing. The cup, like sometimes this material on the side changed. The material that's inside, changed slightly. And then even one of the things about the expensive part too is like the accessories are also expensive. I mean, the cables are more expensive than a HD600 or HD600-650 cable. The pads are more expensive to get than HD600-650 pads. So, but low serial numbers are going to be rare, and then when you do find them, they're going to be expensive. So it all goes back to that expensive part, all going back to rare. The HD800 no longer in production. Now it's the 800S, and then also the HDXX, which I'm not even sure whether they're still available or not, to be quite honest. So let's drop our bad list for a second, and let's go to our good list. What's good about them? We have all this bad stuff. What actually are you getting out of them then? Soundstage. Number 1 with a bullet. Soundstage. There are people that don't care hill of beans a difference about soundstage, and that's fine. A lot of people with headphones are like, I just hear headphones, I hear 2 speakers, and it doesn't really matter. And soundstage doesn't really mean a lot to me. I like speakers for soundstage, and that's fine. But I will say that the HD800's give you, width and depth. The image is wide, the image is tall, image is very pinpoint, very transparent, and that's just part of their nature. I mean, it mostly, a lot of it has to do with the way that the driver is angled and how big the driver is and all the other things, the acoustical properties of all the stuff to make us, to kind of trick us into this sort of 3D dimensionality. But it doesn't mean that any recording that I listen to that, might sound, mono-ish before, it didn't have a soundstage, so all of a sudden I'm going to have a soundstage. It just means those recordings that already sound good, that already have a pretty decent soundstage, the soundstage is going to be even more impressive on these. And that goes along with my sort of next point is details. So yes, so they are very detailed kings. And people talk about, plankton this and plankton that, these tiny little things within the recordings and things like that. And they will reveal that. Not to say that you can hook these up to your laptop and then all of a sudden I'm hearing like all these details that I've never heard before. Like I said, you still have to remember the whole other list of like, it needs good a source, good amplification. It needs all of that to like sort of work. You can't, expect performance out of just one thing. A headphone rig is not just like I buy a car and expect performance out of it. There's other things that you need to go along with it. The same with like, vinyl. Like if I buy this turntable, I'm going to get a heck of a lot of performance out of it. Well, that also matters on whatever, cartridge that you have and whatever tone arm that you have and whatever phono preamp that you have and all of that sort of stuff. So all that stuff like matters and all that stuff like adds up. So just know all of that kind of stuff. And it all goes back to the same point of your enjoyment. So let's just look at all of the things, right? Like they're expensive, they're uncomfortable, they're peaky, they can have bad sound and reveal, things in recordings. It needs just the right amp or setup. But what do they bring to the table? I mean, only like two things, soundstage and details. Like, is that it? But, I mean, some of us have already, experienced some of this with, 600s and 650s. Like, those, always, like I say, like we always say, they scale very well. Meaning, whatever amp or whatever source that you put them with will be a lot more revealing, right? Like, if you scale up your DAC, scale up your amp, like your headphones will be able to sort of like, you can tell the difference, like you can appreciate whatever that is, but then eventually like you're going to come to a point where it's like, okay, I want to go to the next step. Like what's next? And I think that's where like I sort of am. And so, just, and if you're there too, like, okay, if I explored all these amps, I've explored all these sources, and now I want, more, then that's where, the HD800's can be beneficial to you. Just know that I don't listen to this. I don't listen to everything with this. There's only certain recordings that I listen to it, and it's almost like kind of mood thing, or am I in the mood for that particular recording, like whether it be, jazz or there are some, acoustic stuff, bluegrass, acoustic music, or even well recorded, rock or alternative, something like, Guster or even stuff like Spoon. Like I can see me listening and enjoying stuff on the HD800's. So it just goes along with all of that you can have all these things and still, and you only get like the two things out of it. But the two things I will say are something that a lot of these headphones like strive for. So there are trade-offs, and there's going to be trade-offs to every headphone, I think. I think every headphone has a certain amount, just like every gear has a certain amount of trade-off. But, what I've found is if you get good sources, good amps, good DACs, whatever, you can always find variety in your headphones, and you can have different headphones for your different variety, for your different recordings, and for your different moods. So that's at least where I'm at. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have something to say about HD800's, before I go, wait, I'm gonna edit that out. I almost closed without talking about the 800S or HD800's. Let's mention that briefly before I close this episode. 800S added a little resonator to sort of bring out some of the low end and to sort of like, because a lot of people complain of lack of bass in the HD800's. So that's where this little, thing came from. Is you get a like a little more bass. Some people say some of that took away some of the transients, and kind of softened things a little bit. I mean, it does make it sound more balanced. It does make the headphone a little bit more forgiving, but just remember that headphone is probably even more expensive than the HD800. They're still quite enjoyable, but I don't think that they're as quite as detailed and quite as fast, I guess you would say, as the HD800. The HDHXX was like it like doubled down on that idea of more bass. And I look at the frequency curve and I just scratch my head and go, what was happening over a drop when they came up with this? And some people really quite enjoy it, and some people really quite hate it. I have not heard it, so I can't really comment other than looking at the FR curve and really wondering what's happening, and also reading the reviews. If you have some, please comment. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. But just know that is a different headphone, completely different headphone. I think even further removed from the original HD800. So, and whether or not that low bass or whether or not that double resonator or whatever really is like sort of the answer to like more bass. I do know that company called Jupiter Audio Research is making some modifications to the original HD800's to add something else to the headphone to modify original HD800's to balance out the frequency response without losing a lot of the original enjoyable aspects of the HD800 and add some more bass. I only got to hear some of those briefly, but I haven't got to really sit down with them and really listen like long and hard. And I'm hopefully going to have some of those. But once again, it's like you have to get HD800's, and then you've got to get like a mod for them. But it may be worth it, because like if you want more bass, like 800S or HDHXX, like this may be like a better option than just getting than this double resonator kind of thing. I don't know. So yeah, there's other options, and there's other modifications that you can also do that a lot of people have done. Simple mods, ones that are reversible, some that are non-reversible. Like, again, I haven't tried any. If you've tried any, please comment. I'd love to hear about it. And maybe I'll give it a try if it's non-reversible, because I don't want to tear up my nice pair that I spent about $900 on these headphones. So anyhow, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll have some more talks later. We'll see you guys later.